Many thanks to Jerb, Skillspeeder Gaming, Jaren, DayZ Podcast, Taggies Tag West, and that one random for making this video possible. The amount of damage legs take in DayZ 1.12 has been increased, and the amount of damage armor absorbs has been increased too, leading many to believe that shooting someone in the legs is better than shooting someone in the chest versus armor. So in this video we're going to look at the numbers to see if there is a leg meta in DayZ. This is the damage drop off of the blaze. The split second it fires, it does 142 damage, then slowly drops off in damage over distance. So at 500 meters, the blaze inflicts 85 health and shock damage to a player with no armor when shot in the chest. In patch 1.12, the amount of bone damage the leg receives was increased by 20%, which means the leg of a player can be broken at 520 meters with the blaze, because 100 bone damage is required to break a leg, which we'll get into later. For now, this is how much health damage is inflicted by the blaze when shooting a player in the leg, 70% less compared to shooting someone in the chest, whereas the shock damage is 50% less. However, when breaking a player's leg, you inflict plus 20 shock damage instantly, resulting in a line that looks like this. The reason it has this vertical line here is because at this distance the blaze will no longer one-shot break a leg, because remember it takes 100 bone damage to break a leg. An easy way to remember if a weapon can break someone's leg is if it inflicts 83.34 health damage, shown by this line here, it will break someone's leg. So the blaze will one-shot break a leg at 520 meters, and as a result, inflict an additional plus 20 extra shock damage when doing so. As another example, the SKS health damage drop-off as shown here can break a leg up to 180 meters because it inflicts above 83.34 health damage up to this point. Shock damage is not responsible for breaking legs. Now a very important point I have to make during this plus 20 extra shock damage when breaking a leg is that you will only inflict it under the following conditions. The first condition and most obvious requirement is that the leg needs to break. Secondly, the player you're shooting needs to be standing or crouched when the break occurs. This means that if your target is prone, they will not take this additional 20 shock damage when their leg breaks. To support these numbers that I have here on this chart with what happens in the game, the blaze will one-shot KO a player that's standing at point blank range when shot in the leg, whereas when prone, it doesn't KO them. This is because, as shown on this chart here, it inflicts 71 shock damage up close, where if the target takes this additional 20 shock damage from getting a broken leg from being standing or crouched, it's 91 damage, which is above the 75 shock damage requirement to KO a player. This means you cannot KO a player in the leg with the blaze if they're prone at any distance, but you can up to 250 meters if they're crouched or standing, which is a very big difference. So as an unintentional tip for this video, if you're ever idle, going prone protects you from this additional 20 shock damage. Now even though the amount of leg damage the leg takes surprised me, it's still nowhere near the damage you inflict when hitting a player in the chest, so the only question that remains is, does armor make shooting people in the legs viable? Here's the health damage you take from the blaze when wearing the press vest or the stab vest, which is a lot more than the health damage of shooting somebody in the leg. However, the amount of shock damage is very close to the shock damage inflicted when shooting someone in the leg, but nonetheless, if someone is wearing a press vest or a stab vest, which is otherwise known as a police vest, it's still a better option to shoot them in the chest. Removing the press vest and the stab vest and adding the plate carrier instead, we get a different story. Shooting someone in the leg not only does more health damage than shooting a plate carrier in the chest, but also does a lot more shock damage when aiming to break an enemy's leg. The difference here is 30% extra shock damage when shooting for the legs versus shooting the plate chest, a huge bonus that reduces the number of shots to down a player by at least one with most weapons in the game. You can even kill an enemy faster by shooting them in the legs because the health damage goes down faster too, not just the shock damage. To show you an example with another weapon, here is the AK74. It does a different amount of health damage as it does shock damage, displayed by these two lines. This is how much damage is inflicted when shooting a player in the legs, and this is with the plate carrier protecting the chest of the player. So even when you don't break someone's leg, which the AK74 can't do in one shot, or your enemy is prone when you're shooting them, shooting for the legs is still a better option when your enemy is wearing a plate carrier. In this case, it's only 3 extra damage, but if you do get the leg break, it becomes 30% extra damage, which is well worth going for. To give you some more percentages, the shock damage inflicted when shooting the legs of a player is 50% less than shooting the unprotected chest of a player, and if the chest is protected by a plate carrier, that becomes 55% less shock damage, which means that shooting in the legs is a minimum of 5% extra shock damage. As for health damage, the difference here is 10%, so 10% more damage is inflicted when you shoot a player in the legs compared to shooting their plate carrier. So to summarize, legs take 10% more health damage than plate, legs take 5% more shock damage than plate, and you inflict an instant plus 20 shock damage when breaking the legs of a standing or crouching player. Now, having a splint attached won't protect you from this additional shock damage, nor will morphine or painkillers. Only being prone protects you, which might mean that you see more players dropping to the floor to protect their legs. Lastly, because I know this will be mentioned in the comments, the hitbox of the chest of a player is here, and the hitbox of the legs are here. Now obviously the legs have a gaping hole down the middle here, but have a 50% larger hitbox compared to the chest if you count the pixels here. Not to mention the chest is partially protected by the arms, which are currently bugged, as confirmed by the devs, tanking a lot more damage than they currently should. With all of this information in this video, do you believe there is a leg meta in DayZ? Please give me your opinion in the comments. Based on the test with the SVD and the Mosin, as you can see here, I would say it's pretty clear that there is a leg meta in DayZ, but only against players wearing the plate carrier vest that are preferably standing or crouched. Thank you very much for watching, and break a leg.